Hi, hello, and welcome to Poppedia podcast. My name is Kunal. I'm going to be discussing Dune, the film, the idea with Khushi. The film starts with the quote, "Power over spice is power over all," which makes sense because then there's very little contextualizing throughout the movie of what the world is. Denis Villeneuve, in a recent Times of London interview, said, "I don't remember movies because of a good line. I remember them because of a strong image." Uh, and we do see that a lot, especially in the second part, right? The imagery, the visual literacy, it is haunting, it is magnificent. The spectacle goes beyond the idea of storytelling, beyond the idea of narration, too. Not to be disrespectful or anything, but it carries such strong visual hold over the audience. It should be seen in the biggest screen possible, according to me. But that is also something I would like to ask you, Khushi. Do you feel making spectacle enough is a good excuse to not use dialogues or not use that emotional touch that we often see in, say, a Rajamouli's blockbuster or even in a Sanjay Leela Bhansali's film, right? And let's just start the podcast by that. And what do you think about the film?
Yeah, I think I don't think dialogue is so necessary per se to convey emotion, right? Um, and a lot of times landscape sorry, can also evoke a lot of feelings.
Hmm.
But I think Villeneuve has been sort of reticent in using dialogue for I think for a very long time.
Yes.
And also because of the kind of source material, right? Because
Hmm.
okay, Dune is always considered like a film that cannot, a novel that cannot be adapted, cannot be such a hype about it.
Hmm.
And I think also because it is so thought heavy, right? There's a lot of internal dialogue, and if you try to sort of directly translate it into literal dialogue, I don't think that would have worked. So I think that Villeneuve's sort of strategy in terms of it's not using a lot of very, very tight screenplay, just, very minimal. I think also, so it sort of helps and also
Hmm.
allows a lot of his visual medium to convey more and sort of for us to sort of also pay enough attention to sort of what's around and sort of it starts feeling lived in. So I think it helps in this particular case.
Hmm. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And do you feel that in the vision of director, like if you try to justify
Mm,
what Villeneuve has made, do you think in
mm,
his vision, because he must have seen what David Lynch made with the Dune, right? And as
yeah.
you have
Yeah.
talked about Dune, the book is considered to be monumental of
Mm,
science fiction. Even when the book came
yeah.
out, people were confused trying to understand what the world is, what the ecology is,
Yeah.
what people are trying to say,
Yeah.
and all that. So, do you
Yeah.
think for Danny, it was like, I just want to show what the landscape of the world is rather than to talk about the politics. Because
Mm,
it's basic Lion King story, right? If we see in that manner
yeah.
over the stories. So what
Yeah.
do you think about,
Yeah.
do you think it's fairly adapted into a film in your perspective or not?
I think, because like, if you talk about it, the book initially essentially was like serials, right? It was a weekly serial. And
Hmm.
sort of that in itself, the book itself was a serial. Now, when you try to sort of compress it into a film, right, it is able to convey a lot of ideas, but it just makes it, of course, it feels reductive. Of
Hmm.
course, every
Hmm.
film feels from adapted from a book will feel reductive.
Hmm.
Um, but so there's a lot of nuances, that if one just start looking a bit closer, I just
Hmm.
wish that sort of there's always things that should have been prolonged or because they're talking about very, very complex ideas here because mm, Herbert has sort of researched so much and sort of there are so many smaller details
True.
and it's like I just wish it was a series,
And
honestly.
it's like
But I
uh,
hmm,
the
hmm,
book tries to draw the line between politics, between
yes,
religion, individual will. There's
yes,
so much happening in the
yes.
book, right? And the film
Yeah.
tries to
And also
accomplish it all.
yeah,
Ah,
yeah. That was a major thing actually in terms of environmentalism. That was such and ecology. That was such a huge part of the book. They were like indexes, appendices, just full of just descriptions of the ecology, the trees, the methods, the experimentation that they are doing on, and finding out that they have such a huge hoard of water was such a revelation in the book because you're always thinking that, oh, this is this, and just the idea that even while living in such harsh
hmm.
conditions, their dream is still of something, and they're sort of working towards it. Yes, they are waiting for a messiah, but that's not the only thing that they've been doing all this time. And because I think there's certain there's an overt sort of discussion about the religious undertones and what religion and faith can do
Mm,
to people, to the mass, and there's a lot of that in the film. I think that the focus has sort of they have focused on that particular aspect, because even the character of Chani, right, I
mm,
think it helps in a way that she is like the critical viewpoint, right? She is
yeah.
the what we're supposed to stand for, and this is around halfway point in the film, right? We shift sort of in the first half. We are in sort of like Paul's point of view. We are sort of we are understanding the Fremen, their siege, their ways of living, and sort of him coming to making a family from the people around him. And in the second half, it sort of shifts. I think we start seeing Paul from like Chani's point of view and sort of seeing where he's going and where he's leading. It helps, I think, because it's almost that he sort of turns into this non-emotional, distant being who's just very prophetic. He's
Mm,
a
mm,
prophet, and yet there's no humanity, sort of that we can sense from, and that we can see through Chani. So, and that's why that's Pura, the critic of the Messiah. Everything is happening from Chani. In the books, it wasn't so. It wasn't. It was in Paul's head. Everything was the critique, the belief in himself. Everything was within him. It's nice that they gave Chani the role of that, the
mm,
role of the critic, because I think it would have been difficult to portray just all of these factions inside it. Actually, the middle section, right, when he's sort of doubting himself, doubting the problem, he's not going
huh.
south. Mother is telling him, you should go, you should go. This is where it leads. But he's trying to sort of fight with destiny almost. And so that section, I think, was very interesting. I loved
Mm,
that. But
mm.
him sort of struggling with it. And I wish that struggle was longer. Because
And
it's very sudden. They move to the south, and
uh,
suddenly he's going into the temple hall and drinking that water. Yeah.
yes, and
Mm.
Twani, do you think if you had not read the book,
Mm.
it
Mm.
like middle of Dune 1 में तो है ही, but in Dune 2 as well,
Mm.
middle of the movie, I was thinking कि if I had not read the book, to
Mm.
like completely understand what the director wants to say is like impossible. I don't even think it's possible
Mm.
without reading the book. If
Challenging.
to understand what the aspect, like
Yeah.
as you have talked about how
Mm.
detailed the ecology of Dune is. Frank Herbert ने कितना डिटेल में
Yeah.
उसको बनाया था. I do not think
Yeah.
that level they have reached in the film
Mm.
particularly.
Mm.
Did you like what they did with Fjord Ratha?
Mm. It felt very cookie cutter villain, thoda, because the Harkonnens as a whole, I know even in the books it was something of that sort, but actually, the whole scene when Fair is first introduced,
Hmm.
right? Um, is where you see the mass, you see Harkonnen mass. And what I realized now while thinking back on it is that you're seeing very few civilians in this whole thing,
Ah,
right? In
yes.
the Harkonnen world, there is yes, there are that's I think that there are people around, and of course it's black and white and
Hmm.
all that, but it's like I cannot see any sort of heterogeneous sense of a mass. It
Hmm.
feels very VFX. I mean, yeah, maybe good, but VFX, I can see that there are people, but it doesn't feel. It starts feeling very one note when it's that way. This particular planet, this kind of people,
Yeah.
and even with the Fremen, right? At
Hmm.
least, of course, there was this rebel group, and so there were nuances of but I wish there was like more diversity there in terms of all right. There's one group uh, who believes in the prophecy, and they also sort of believe in Paul, right?
Hmm.
Then there as a outsider as the one. Then there could be others who believe in the prophecy but do not think Paul is the one, and could be others who don't believe in the prophecy. There's a lot of depth that you get there,
Hmm.
which I felt was in terms of faith, right? I
Hmm.
like the mirroring that they did with Paul's character and them being. There was that they were like two sides of a coin almost, and the Gom Jabbar scene is sort of mirrored, right, with both of them.
Hmm.
Uh, so a lot of some of the aspects of and the way Paul starts behaving after he drinks the water of life is sort of it is mirroring sort of what faith is doing. So
Ah,
that bit I did like. but I think they could have reduced it just to so you had Dave Bautista's character, you had they could have sort of amalgamated into one for the
Mm,
film at
true,
least.
true. And
If they've
also,
taken so much freedom.
huh,
Hmm.
because you have talked about this scene, there's also this one scene that I feel was very memorable for me because
Hmm.
the fetus,
Yeah.
for a brief second, Anya Taylor-Joy comes and she's
Yeah.
talking with Paul and then she's gone. And I think that's where kind
Yeah.
of cinema wins over literature,
Hmm.
somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like that section, when she is such a huge part of like the conversations, right? And it's also a way of sort of just explicitly saying, what's going on. Well,
Uh,
that's a good way. Exposition can be अच्छा तरीका है, but also it doesn't feel very contrived.
uh,
Uh, the great thing I like, I noticed this over the two films.
hmm,
When you first see Paul having visions, right? There are fragments. They're like parts. There's a hand, there is the feet. Maybe there's this very small fragments, right? When he first sort of inhales the spice, the fragments get larger, right? And he sort
hmm,
of sees abstract things. There's going to be holy wars, this, that. They're larger, but they're still fragments.
hmm,
Later, as he sort of gains more control over it, he sees the visions keep changing, right? So you see first, then when he sees the war and him fighting, and then it's replaced by the Chani fighting,
uh,
and Jamis, he was supposed to, he sees Jamis killing him. It turns
hmm,
out he kills Jamis, and you
uh,
sort of see that uncertainty, right? Uncertainty. There's this sense of confusion that these dreams real, and they also have this very hazy dream-like quality. And even on the first part, right, when he sees sort of himself following a female figure into the desert
hmm,
in the south, and people dying of faith and sort of fundamentalist sort of approach, and that is also quite hazy, right? And then sort of as you move for it's uncertain.
hmm,
After the only vision and the last vision that we see is with Anya Taylor Joy as
huh,
his sister,
huh,
and that is extremely clear, right? And that's when he like gains complete sort of control over it after drinking that water, and that's it. Then we have no sort of idea what's going on inside
hmm,
his head, and that's it. That's where we stop seeing his visions and start looking at him from the outside. So that
hmm.
was very interesting as a narrative choice. That starts getting clearer, 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 and we end with that.
True,
Yeah.
true, true. But many things
Yeah.
about Dune too, the
Hmm.
decisions like this make the whole film more clearer. Like now, can you imagine Dune 1
Hmm.
as a standalone film after like 2 years or even after like 2 months of the film's release? Like I cannot even
Hmm.
imagine going to the theater and like knowing where Dune 1 ended. It doesn't feel like a
Hmm.
complete film, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
And
this one also doesn't feel like
it
a complete
but
film,
there's
right?
still this like
That
climatic
yes.
feels to the film. Huh.
Yeah. True. But it's almost like the way it ends so abruptly, which is also, I mean, Villeneuve was saying that he was being true to the true to the book, right, and the way it ends. And that I think helps that he's not following the typical sort of three-part structure, and there's the climax and there's an end. There's always, of course, there was a big sort of section in here which was the sort of vindication, the sort of climactic sort of high,
Hmm.
and it sort of, I think it sort of tapers a little bit, and then there's this left.
Huh. Huh.
Yeah,
And
yeah, and he's
does
always
the
like,
film
oh
bore you?
no, it did not bore me.
Okay,
It
makes
did
sense.
not. I was captivated like throughout. There were a few. I think I wish that I don't know whether Villeneuve was the action director of the film.
I'm not sure.
I wish there was a choreographer, an action choreographer,
Hmm.
who's also picking up the beats of the action, because wars was such a
Ah.
huge section of this, right? And for example, Gurney and uh, this Dear Batista, right? They have this face off. Like Gurney has been waiting since eons. Like even before they were vanquished, he had this deep hatred for the Harkonnens, and we are waiting for him to feel this sense of uh oh, finally, sort of
Ah, yes.
the sense of revenge. And but I don't know, I think that might be a little also uh intentional on his part, because he didn't want it to feel too uh v- at- so I don't that was there was a feeling of joy, almost in the sense of revenge as you're on this side. But I think Villeneuve was trying very hard not to keep a balance between, we want to believe in Paul and what he stands for,
Hmm.
right? But is also critical of his methods,
Hmm.
right? And so maybe that's why there's this feeling of confusion, whether we are supposed to, there's a sense of rooting for this family have lost everything, for the Fremen have been colonized for so long,
Hmm.
but also there's this sense of, oh, but how far will they go and what are the consequences of, so that is sort of pushing and pulling. And what I remember, and I was talking about it after it immediately finished, I was just feeling the sense, it was this sadness, right, about the way the emperor was talking about Leto One, right?
Ah.
And how he had started believing in the rule of the heart, and how that is not sort of acceptable in this kingdom. And that was just heartbreaking, honestly. I think that was when I felt most, honestly, in the whole thing, about this death of a duke. He didn't believe in revenge. There was a certain idealistic sort of approach on it. There was and also I was feeling sad because there were too many things about real life that were reflected in this fiction, right? There are too many things that
Hmm.
we're seeing around us. It's like, yes, I see the connection. Sometimes it's too overt as well, but and it's like, he is violence inevitable is the sort of
Hmm.
thing that
Hmm.
I was left with.
And I think you are right. I mean, it might be intentional for the way he has
Mm,
crafted the whole film, but that's
yeah.
what is missing from Dune, both the parts, part one and part two. Like while I was
Mm,
reading the book,
mm,
I had a sense of connect with all these people.
yeah.
In
Yeah.
Dune 2, the only connect I felt was when
Mm,
the
mm,
audience starts to cheer for Paul and he's going to
mm,
kill, and he becomes the Messiah. I think that's
mm,
what's missing from the film for me personally.
mm, mm. I think now what might have helped, maybe,
Hmm.
is
Hmm.
that they could have led us to sort of believe uncritically that this is your typical white savior trope, right? This is what you're getting. And yes, you've put in these seeds of doubt, thoda, with respect to Paul, but let us gain that high and then realize that, oh my God, what the hell? This
Ah,
is,
ah,
we were feeling happy about it, but not, now the rug's pulled from under you. Maybe that might have, made more of an impact.
hmm.
Maybe this is a more balanced way of going about it, but I think that would have created a more emotional sort of
Ah, ah,
engagement with
ah.
the film.
And
Maybe.
within all the criticism, I'm still very happy that someone has made like
Hmm.
a a still to be viewed version of Dune, right? Like whatever
Yeah.
we say, when you're watching Dune in
Yeah.
cinema, it's a treat to
Yes.
watch, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's an eye candy. Like you just want to watch the visuals,
Absolutely.
keep watching it, keep watching it. I'm not sure
Yeah.
who the production designer is. Patrice
Hmm.
something, right? He won an Oscar for Dune 1, and again
Hmm.
gone to the depth of creating sets,
Yeah.
creating the design to a way
Yeah.
like even when a scene
Yeah.
passes, you are still you know,
Yeah.
revisiting
Yeah.
the scene.
Yeah. It's, I'm an architect, right? So I
Huh.
can sort of see these sort of the way they've designed the Fremen in the last one, right? There were like more detailed shots of
Mm,
Arrakis and
mm,
the city of Arrakeen, and just the way light has been dealt with in terms of, and there's a certain emptiness in that frame, which sort of gives it this grandeur and gives it a certain gravity,
yeah.
right? And that's also maybe makes us feel a little more detached. But also the sets are sort of beautiful. Even this Fremen one, there was a lot of references. It felt like we were walking through Ahmedabad, some stepwell in Ahmedabad,
Ah,
right? There
yes.
was a sense of that, just the water, even the all the women, they felt like our Rajasthani folklore. The women who talk about it, it felt very vernacular in that sense. It was
Ah.
very, very beautiful.
Also, the scene where Chani is teaching Paul how to like how to walk in on the sand. That's also so
Yeah, yeah,
poetic. That's also so poetic. Like, it's like
that's
watching a
beautiful.
Bollywood film,
Yeah.
right? They are both dancing in a way. There's a rhythm to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I think there was a double there. Maybe.
Uh,
Just the feet you see, right? Because in the first one, I was like, yeah, this is not the way to go about, walking. It just feels so fake.
uh,
They're trying to walk and it feels very tilted. And even this time around, I think the actor is trying, but there's a certain grace, right, in the way
uh,
they walk. And that you can see in Chani, but not in, maybe that's intentional.
good. And I like this thing about films. Like anything could be intentional. Any critique could be
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
could be intentional.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Also, there's this
Yeah.
one scene that I like very much, in
Mm,
which Paul is walking through the whole crowd, and the crowd is kind of slipping away.
mm,
And ऊपर से ऐसा पूरा
mm.
wide shot है, and you can
Yeah,
just see इतना
yeah,
structure होगा, जाते 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 जाते. And that's what I'm talking
yeah,
about. Visually, the film is very great.
yes,
Like for
yeah.
And because I also want to make films in future, right? I was
Mm,
just kind of कि अच्छा हाँ
mm,
हाँ हाँ हाँ, it makes sense, makes sense, makes sense, makes
ah.
sense. Fuck dialogue, fuck everything. This completely makes sense. But then because 2 दिन हो गए अब फिल्म देखे, you start to realize कि हाँ
Mm.
ऐसा है, yes, this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the major one also the issue. I don't have an issue with the sister being in the womb and them
Hmm.
talking and this being this invisible entity but still present in the story.
Hmm.
But what it does is that in the first one I remember very clearly of it just being 2 weeks since Jessica's been pregnant, and that was before the invasion. And you're like, the fetus is not even born. It's been like what, 8 months, and you have all of this happening at 8 months. You start feeling in the book there's so much time. There are years. Paul as a child, Jessica as
Yeah.
a child. There's so much things. There's a certain sense of all that seems believable.
Hmm.
Okay, he's able to sort of take over. And Jessica, I think, yeah, they also, I think Jessica has major, a more major role in the films as the mother and the child. They're going with that trope of the mother
Huh.
and the son as the saviors.
Yes. Even
And
that dialogue, "Fear is the mind killer," is being proven by her in the
yeah,
first film.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like that she was like an active part of Paul's ascension in a way, and she was sort of also working through, and she has a particular way of uh, going about it, of gaining power. And Paul's, initially we would think that it was something different, and then it sort of merges into one. But I think it feels truncated after they reach the south.
Hmm.
It feels like in terms of pacing, just is too far. And actually, the scene where he's speaking in front of the elders and all of the leaders, it doesn't feel as convincing to me somehow.
Yes, yes.
Because
And
I don't know if Timothy Chalamet is trying to like project a very charming, a very uh, this tonality. Even when Jessica is leaving and he's saying that's not hope, and it comes out of all of a sudden, and it doesn't
uh,
feel like a natural conversation that
uh,
the argument is rising, and then that's like the last. And even while he's shouting at things at people, it feels kind of that it feels very pretentious, and it
hmm.
just feels very fake. But
Hmm.
maybe that's also intentional, because they are trying to show that
But
this is
and
all just make
uh,
and pretend.
Also, now that you have talked about it, do you like, I was thinking about this while I was reading the book. उसमें जब Paul,
Mm,
from a boy to a man to like a man emperor to a messiah, you can
mm,
feel him growing up, right? Timothy is a great actor,
yeah.
but I
Mm.
think
The physicality.
that's what's been missing from Paul's character. Like once he becomes
Yeah,
messiah, you still kind of see him as a boy only. If you've not read the book, it's like
yeah,
he's the same only, because there's not enough
yeah.
conviction in himself also. After even he
Mm,
accepts that I'm a messiah, there's no conviction, because there are
mm,
no dialogues, or there are not enough lines through which
mm,
has not read the book can
mm,
understand what the context to this is, right?
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Okay. Stilgar. We talk about Stilgar.
Who played Stilgar?
Javier Bardem.
हावियर बारडेम, हाँ उसका भी।
Hmm.
आई वाज थिंकिंग द सेम कि उसको लाइक द ह्यूमर पार्ट ऑफ इट पूरा ऐसे
Yeah.
होप दिया है कि हाँ बस योर जॉब इज टू keep the audience engaged and the audience must laugh when you come on the screen.
But it's sort of very interesting that because he is like a religious despot, right? In a way, right? And you're still, that's like the most human character in the
हाँ
world.
हाँ
I think that sort of is
वो- and
true. But it
because
was a
because because
relief actually sometimes.
हाँ and continuous
Hmm.
he is the medium through which Danny is showing कि people have faith,
Hmm.
and Florence is
Hmm.
continuously उसका monologue चल रहा है कि
Yeah.
faith is important, religion,
Yeah.
faith. I
Yeah.
got a little bored with that, after a point of time,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
then when are you channeling this energy to? Where are you channeling this energy
Hmm.
to? Like, you are
Hmm.
continuously talking about faith, but I do not see
Hmm.
the conviction in the film. That's what my whole
Hmm.
problem right now is. But I don't know if
Hmm.
अगर मैं और 2 दिन
Hmm.
सोचूंगा, my opinions would have changed
Hmm.
again completely. Yeah, I do want to see the film again. Do you wish to see the
Yeah.
film again?
Yeah, I'm planning to.
हाँ, I'm also planning to see the film again.
Have to.
हाँ,
And
why
also,
not?
I think, uh, Florence, the princess, what I like in the film, some part of it, is that you, in Paul's life, once he becomes like a messianic figure,
Hmm.
uh, in the end, when he asked everyone to bow to him, right, as he's the religious figure, he's a religious head, he's the emperor, as and everyone does except the women in his life, right? You have Irulan, you have Chani, you have his mother, and I think Gurney also, right, didn't bow, right? And that was
Doesn't.
his close friend, and those people are sort of the only strands of humanity, though who are seeing a strand of humanity in him and not godhood,
Hmm.
which was nice. It's nice. Felt little. What did you think about the atomic power thing?
मैं मैं तो भूल गया था ऐसा कुछ था में। I completely
I
forgot about
don't
that.
think था कुछ ऐसा in the book. Somehow I also don't remember
हाँ,
the
I don't
anything
remember.
about
I
atomic
don't
warhead.
वही I don't remember anything. Like मेरे को बहुत टाइम हो गया बुक रीड किए भी, but
Same here.
हाँ, I was also confused about what's happening with the atomic thing continuously, because it's been mentioned
Yeah,
like 2-3 times, right?
yeah, and maybe it's like it's a way of sort of talking about like maybe current, just the real world, and sort of maybe that's a but I don't know. I don't somehow don't remember the book talking about it, and
Same.
but also the way it was. It's also a gripe I have with the climax, right? Because you're waiting for these two sides to sort of finally sort of have a go at it and just sort of fight till the death, sort of.
Mhm.
And you have the vampire, you have the Sardaukar, you have the Harkonnens, and there's three four of them, and there's a certain scale to it. And immediately with the atomic warhead, it feels like too easy a
हाँ,
solution somehow. It's just like immediately, it's just
but you can still draw
yeah, that's
parallel, ki because
mm,
why when the book was being written, it was basic America versus Russia thing, right?
yeah,
Dark
yeah, yeah,
Bay era and all that, and
yeah,
then
the Cold War, yeah,
it does make a little
yeah,
sense कि क्यों
yeah,
ऐसा किया
yeah,
किया होगा और वो क्यों कर
yeah,
सकते हैं.
yeah, yeah.
Do you know if there's going to be a Dune Part 3 or not? Because I'm not sure if he's going to make a.
I listened to, I mean, I heard a few interviews with Denny, right?
Hmm.
And he was like, he was very non-committal about it, right? कि
हाँ
बनेगा तो बनेगा, नहीं बनेगा तो पता
हाँ
नहीं.
वही, because for the first
But
2 parts he was very hyped up कि हाँ मेरा
yeah, but
magnum
I
opus
think
आने वाला है.
con वो contractual, I think that must be, that would sort of based on, that will be based on how Dune 2 performs, probably.
Makes sense, because a Dune
Have
trilogy
you
would be banging.
Yeah. Have you read the second book or the
No,
third book?
no.
Well, yeah, me neither. Me neither. And I've looked at its summaries, right, to sort of understand where this is going. And then what I've heard from most people is it gets weirder, it gets more
No,
intricate.
I know what happens. पूरा,
It's
क्योंकि
yeah,
one of my friend
yeah.
has read every Dune thing that has came.
Wow,
Children of Dune
wow,
से लेकर सब कुछ उसने पढ़ के रखा है.
wow.
And it just keeps
Chapter
getting
after
fucked up and it's not good.
yeah,
He
yeah. It's
says
sort of,
not
I
to
think
read.
sort of ends with the whole thinking machine versus human wala trope.
हाँ.
It just ends somewhere there.
The Paul
But
का son and then उसका son and
yeah,
it
over
gets very basic.
5,000 years, 5,000 years, and but I would love to. What I really liked, I think in Dune Messiah, at least the way I want to see, I'm really excited to see sort of this turning into like a proper now criticism. We sort of shifted the first one was that it's still with this, it's hopeful, there's this young lad
हाँ.
and he'll save everyone. And the second half there's some doubt and then sort of we're ending on a larger question about what is appropriate and how far is too far. And I think the third one probably would somehow descend into just mayhem. And I would love to see that sort of the growth of that character into turning into this, and then the sort of how sort of he deals with this responsibility, this
हाँ हाँ
guilt,
हाँ
this
हाँ हाँ, yes 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 yes.
prophecy. That would be lovely, and this complete critic, almost like an anti-hero. It's
हाँ.
completely shift.
And that's why
That
Dune
would be
trilogy would
that would be
bang completely.
yeah,
What they should do is
yeah.
they should wait first for Timothy to grow up.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
And
agree.
then make the film.
Yeah,
I have heard
yeah.
I have heard is currently making an adaptation of Rendezvous with Rama. Have you heard about that book? I heard that book is also like
Mm-hmm.
it's
No,
it's
I haven't heard.
Arrival on steroids. That's what I've heard.
Okay.
So,
But I
but I
think
think we have still
it's a
created like a 30-35 minute
yes,
conversation.
yes. I think it's a beautiful film, and I think what I like about Denny is that he's not following a formula, right?
Yeah.
Of the typical hero story, and that with what's become typical of sci-fi now,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And so the that the nature of it, I mean, I find that things have value if even if just for the sake of being different. I think uh, right कि even सिर्फ सिर्फ अलग है उतना
mm,
काफी है
mm.
just in terms of to sort of compare with respect to the blockbusters and the typical definition of a blockbuster, right? The sort of things we imagine, the sort of scale we imagine. There's scale, no doubt, in this film, but it's of a different kind. I think that's also representative of the book, anyway,
Yes.
because even though it was one of the pioneering science fiction books at the
Mm,
time, and sort of it was sort of the story was sort of taken forward, and then you have the Star Wars, you have the great science fiction books, and this was like a contemporary of them, but this was what sort of differentiated it from a lot of those is that there's a certain complexity, there's a certain sort of negotiation, there are moral questions, yes, but there's like political intrigue, there's a lot of existential sort of uh, questions that are inbuilt in the book, and that is also sort of always reflective of the times. It feels very relevant today, right? Even if it was written such a long time ago. And I think that's also, I think the beauty of the film, and in the hands of Denis, I think it has sort of it's been able to capture that sense
mm.
quite beautifully, and it's quite stark. It is minimal. It is grand, but so that sort of makes those. It doesn't sort of shy from. Yes, there is a little comic thing with Stilgar per se, right? But
Mm.
it's not meta. कि मतलब oh no, see,
Huh.
we know what we are doing, but it's very sincere, and that's what sort of I like about it. Okay,
There's
it's
honesty.
not trying
There's
to
honesty in the
say
film. There's
yes,
honesty in the film. There's no doubt
yes,
about it. And it's a good
yeah,
thing when
and
filmmakers, when big filmmakers like this try to make
hmm,
films on novels such as Dune, right? As I
yeah,
said,
yeah,
also, I'll share you the link of the book. this Maya,
Yeah.
this Rendezvous with Rama or something. And
Uh-huh.
I heard
Yeah.
that's also a great book. And
Absolutely.
sci-fi should always be enjoyed, right?
Yeah.
Films like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
should always be made. And because you're talking about Dune,
Yeah.
there's this one review I read about the book, the original book. It was
Hmm.
written in the 1960s only
Hmm.
for the Telegraph or
Hmm.
something. In that, the writer
Hmm.
wrote elements and aspects of Dune would be
Hmm.
seen in sci-fi, in any work of sci-fi that's going to
Hmm.
come over the century. And that's very true, right?
Hmm.
Star Wars mein dikhta hai,
Yeah.
even fantasies like Game of Thrones mein dikhta hai, whatever you take.
Yeah.
Dune,
Yeah.
a
Everywhere.
portion of Dune is always present in whatever
Yeah.
science fiction
Yeah.
or whatever fantasy you are
Yeah.
reading. So the
Yeah.
impact of that is also very great.
Yeah. And I'm sort of a big believer in sort of, I have a lot of friends who sort of, and a lot of people around me who think is fiction is some, or pop culture is a very, what's the right word for it? It's a very shallow thing, or it's it's just entertainment, or it's
Depth
just.
nahi hai.
Yeah, and
हाँ,
it's a lot of it is just this is just time pass and a lot of things. This is just a film, and there's a lot of discussion in that, and especially there are people who will read non-fiction but not fiction. Like, fiction is just stories and all of that, and I have a big issue with that. I mean, I could
same.
talk non-stop about it because I think what I have understood, over the years of sort of reading so much. I've been reading since childhood, and what I've realized is that who I am as a person, right? The
Hmm.
things that I understand about interpersonal relationships have been less from experience and more through books, right? The sort of understanding I have about the world as a whole,
हाँ,
and fiction sort of makes it palatable. Abhi, you read all of these things, the events that happen in uni, you read it in a news article, you just feel tragic, and you just you don't want to deal with it. It's very escapist of us, and my tendency is to like it feels too tragic, and this sort of uh, allows you a way to sort of uh, actually think about it
hmm.
without having that deep sense of sort of guilt or helplessness. I think fiction allows you a way to sort of not fear in a way,
हाँ, yes,
and sort of actually sort of look at the world. I think reality can only be read indirectly. There's no real, if you sort of, it keeps on shifting so much, you try to look at it directly and it moves, it shifts. It's so very the complex world we live in. And so fiction sort of undercuts all of that pop culture, all of this, and it sort of allows you to, yeah, it sort of deal with your day-to-day life, day-to-day truths and fact that you have to live with. You have to live with war. You have to live with what's coming, and it's sort of, yeah, it's a catharsis in a way. And so I
true.
think that's,
And I don't
yeah.
think there's any like logical understanding
Hmm.
to when people say ki fiction or pop culture doesn't have depth. I mean, all the
Hmm.
stories that we see, even stories like Dune, the
Hmm.
it's taking place, it's taking place in a place which is universal. Like when we watch
Yeah.
theater, when we watch theater,
Hmm.
if
Hmm.
there's no space, right? It's a universal space. You just
Yeah.
kind of understand it. It's the direct way of your
Yeah.
interpretation. It's the direct way to channel whatever
Exactly.
your world around is, whatever your whatever your politics is, whatever your identity
Hmm.
is. I mean, I
Hmm.
personally I don't think fiction में जितना depth होता है, like the greatest of the
Yeah.
philosophies would lack that, right? Because of that
Yeah.
universal quality. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
yes. And I think we
Yes.
should end the podcast here.
Yes.
Thank you for
Absolutely.
joining.